Hi. I don't think I got introduced, but I'm Jess Kirkman, Global Head of Brand Creative at Mattel, and I'm really excited to have this conversation today. Everyone got a quick introduction. I'll give another quick one while I'm here. I have Tim Bards, who leads AWS's MarTech and all things tech and AI and data for AWS advertising and marketing. We have Gabrielle, who leads global brand sales and partnerships at Zynga, which is where she helps shape brands showing up in gaming. Really exciting. And then we have Matt, CEO of MediaRadar, with a unique view of the landscape across media and creative and advertising. And then last but certainly not least, Brandon over there, the CCO of Notorious 111, who has spent his career shaping brands like Louis Vuitton, Red Bull, Coca-Cola, and turning them into cultural phenomenon. So we have a really awesome crowd with us today, and we're gonna get into a great conversation about risk. And I think only like 7 people raised their hands for bold moves and risk-taking. I think we want to change that by the end of this conversation. So like I mentioned, I'm Jess, and I get to work at Mattel, which has some of the most iconic brands that people have grown up with. And one of the things I've learned from working at Mattel is that kids don't worry about rules, and they take risk, they play, they make mistakes, and they learn and they grow and they change. And I think that's one of the things that we have really incorporated into how we work is just try things. And I think that's what we want to start to talk about today. So speaking of that, everyone takes risks, and I think no one often wants to be the one putting their neck out on the line for those risks. But I want to start with, Tim, you have said that one of the biggest risks is not taking a risk, and I would love to get your take on that.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting topic, especially here at Cannes. I've talked with both sides of the coin. One customer said, we're risk averse, we want to see where things shake out. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, you're going to miss the boat here. So AI is revolutionizing a lot of what we do in advertising technology and, of course, in creative and other things like that. And the biggest risk is not doing anything and being behind the curve, and it's going to be very difficult to catch up. In the flip side conversation, I was meeting with a customer this morning who said they launched a whole new platform. It's a site, I won't go tell you who it is, but in 2 months for under $100,000. And he said, at that price, I can literally spin up new products. If they don't work, I kill them 2 months later. It's like the pace of innovation and the opportunity to take risks is real. And that's why I want everyone to think more like customer number 2 than customer number 1.
I think we've talked about this, even the vernacular around the word risk, it's almost seen as a negative word. And as we start to talk about it, it almost has become something we're putting into our process now. And so, Brandon, we've had a chat before about risk and the definition. And how do you define risk? And is there a difference between risk and causing harm to a brand?
Absolutely. It was funny, I was having a conversation earlier this week with some friends at Google. And I said, if you look throughout history, the villain that becomes the hero is the one that is the most notorious. Right? So the difference between being evil and a villain, but the villain who actually is challenging the world to see it differently based off of honesty and the true human connection that a brand is trying to give the world, then the risk is never about like measuring risk. It's actually like calculating the risk, knowing that we're going to have to do risky things to ever make impact. So we should never be thinking about it from a place of like, how risky is this? We should be thinking about like, how risky can we be to do what we are committed to say that we're doing in the world and to put that in the world. So now, as long as we are being true to the commitment for whatever your product is, whatever you are saying that what you're putting into the community, are we true to that commitment of what we said, to the honesty of it? Now it's not risk anymore. It's just like, are we being as truthful and honest as possible? So therefore, you don't have to worry about the risk. There's gonna be haters. Taylor Swift said it best. Haters gonna hate. You gonna get the bots. You gonna get the people who are just trolling you. That's not risk, right? That's not to be risk averse. That's just realizing that you're actually doing something that is changing the world. So now the villain is becoming the hero.
I love that. And speaking of villains and heroes, I have Masters of the Universe movie on my mind, if anyone has seen it, with Heyman and Skeletor, the classic villain. But I do think what you're saying is putting something out there and getting a response similar to what you were saying, not taking a risk at all. I think, how can we see how people are going to respond to us if we don't put something out there that we've never done before? And is that really even considered a risk? And so I would love to change that definition and start seeing how our audience and consumers respond to us. And on that note, Gabrielle, I had a question for you, because you're in the gaming space and you have the ability to move super quickly and learn in real time and get almost immediate reaction to the tech and the gaming you're putting out there. Do you ever put out products or ideas that you're still testing, and can that be seen as risky? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the mobile game space is a live service environment. So we like to fail fast, and we don't necessarily spend months and time and millions of dollars waiting to put something out. We will do a feature, put it out, or a game even, half built, put it out to small audiences, and then as we get buy-in and see consumer feedback and it's positive, then we scale it. So I know our founder, Mark Pincus, tells a story about Zynga Poker, which is like one of our kind of legacy titles that still is going really strong today. And when they first built it, like they built it in a couple of weeks, really like there wasn't that much functionality in it. And then they saw such an uptake from consumer response that then they built out the full app. So I think the great thing about the mobile app space and mobile app developers is fail fast, take risks, because they have a way to limit the exposure by not investing too much and getting proof points before moving it to completion.
I love that, failing fast. I'm going to take that note as well. And I think that's it. Like, you can learn really quickly, you can adapt really quickly, and then you move on and you create even bigger and better work. And I think that's how we see original work out in the world. And Matt, from your perspective in the media world, and you get to see so much creative and kind of get a bird's eye view of the landscape, what work do you feel is actually breaking through, or does a lot of it look the same to you?
To be honest with you, I would say 70 to 80% of all ads don't break through because people are afraid to break from conventional wisdom, right? They want to protect the brand. They were trying to hold on to their jobs, or they want to keep doing what they're doing. So I always call it the Sally principle. If I think about media plans and advertising and even creative, a lot of times it's same as last year, right? And as I think about risk when you break through, you can have a big impact. And I think a good example right now is the World Cup, right? So if you guys have seen the stadium signages, they all have to get rebranded to the city. And I'm sure, I wasn't in the room, but I'm sure there was a board meeting at Levi's where they were like, hey, the CFO was like, can we get our money back from the branding rights at the stadium? And some intrepid marketer or creative was just like, hold my beer. I got an idea. And if you saw what they did with Levi's Stadium, and they covered the logo, but they wrapped it so tight where you actually could see, you knew that brand.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a very powerful example of a brand could have just said, hey, we get it, we're going to cover the logo and move on. But they were bold enough to take a risk that consumers would recognize the Levi's logo without the word Levi's.
Yeah.
And they leaned into that into a really big way, right? And that's very different. Levi's has always been about their like trademark color red and their lettering. And that was very different than anything else they've ever done before. And I think that's a bold example of risk that's paid back in a huge way for that brand and that franchise.
Yeah, I actually think it helped people understand the Levi's logo more than they did before as a distinctive asset. Like you said, they've leaned into other parts of their brand, and to actually cover it up that way, take a risk. And the worst that would happen is no one noticed. And that rarely ever happens. And it turns into, if you know, you know. And then I saw like 20 other brands covering their logos, which we often see is brands then mimic. And I think the first couple that do it, sure, great, you're paying an homage, but eventually everything starts to look the same again. And I think I don't want to dive too deep into the classic AI story, but it's almost like AI carries that same model in terms of creative generation, where it's just pulling from what's already been done. It's not having the idea to cover up the logo and push that forward and do all that. And so I kind of wanted to ask a little bit in that space of, Tim, you've been talking about when it does come to AI and being more efficient, and we're already talking about how great ideas come out from the world, and Brandon, we'll get to that because we have some good stories, but you were talking a little bit about using AI for an efficiency tool, or you had a little bit of a different take on that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fear, getting back to that word risk and fear, around what AI is going to do to the average human's job. Right, so people have a concern about using it. They're concerned that it's going to put them out of work or it's going to dramatically change how they work. And I'd love to take the word efficiency out of that story and change it to proficiency. Because what we're really seeing is it makes people more proficient, and it can accelerate, in some cases 10x, maybe even 20x. We see that in coding all the time. We're seeing that in creative development. My sister's in creative, and she is a big Photoshop user. And I said, imagine a time when there wasn't Photoshop and you had to do everything manually, and then along comes Photoshop. It didn't put you out of a job. It transformed how quickly you could do things and how you could do them in a better fashion. So I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, and it's a tool like anything else, and we're going to have to figure out how to work with that. Brandon, coming back to you, and we've talked about how AI is almost having this like effect where we're almost proving as brands and as people that we're human again, which I love that it's having that effect. And I like what you said about how it's making us more proficient and more human in the way we use tools and experience the world. And so Brandon, I really want to hear from you in terms of like, how can the human experience make ideas more valuable, especially in this new landscape?
No, for sure. I think, live like the providence of living. The machine has not lived. It is only taking what has been someone else's life and then building it off from that without having the experience of having to go through the ups and the downs of it. So I think when we use AI, especially, it is a tool, and that's all it is, right? The paintbrush, much like what the paintbrush was when it was invented, it was a tool. And anybody can pick up a paintbrush in this room and understand the concept of painting, but not everybody is going to be Picasso, right? And the only reason that an artist can then build something that truly connects with people is the drama that it has lived. Like every single one of us on this stage have different life stories, and we bring that to bear in very different worlds. So the work as a creative, we're always putting ourselves. There's something that we experienced, or there's something that we heard. AI does not hear anything, right? AI doesn't really think and then like cognitively put things together based off of the little things, from microaggressions to like big inspirations and dreaming. AI has never dreamed, right? It has never had to think about like the risk or the bravery. It just says, this is what I think based off of what I've researched. So if we live in a time now, this time has been here many, many times before, we must use the tool to not be about replacing anybody. It is efficient. It makes us move faster. But what it's going to do is it's going to expose those, what I believe a lot in marketing, and I'm going to hurt some people's feelings. There are a lot of mediocre people in marketing, and they have been able to hide. And what AI has exposed now is whatever you have in your cup. I'm spilling it on myself. I got rosé and I just spilled some damn rosé on my pants, but that's okay, and we can. Rosé spilt on me, right? Fact. If I have doubt, fear, and I take that in and put it in AI, guess what is going to also reflect back? Doubt, fear. But if I got bravery and confidence and boldness, but also a human understanding of community, of commitment, of understanding the power that we have as brands to put what I said before, the honesty that our brand is giving to the world, the purpose that our brand has to be in these people's lives, then guess what's gonna come out when I spill, when it becomes rough, when it becomes hard. And that's what I have to bring into AI to make it more human. So as long as I can be vulnerable with AI, and I'm gonna teach AI to be vulnerable with me, and I'm gonna question it and be like, no, I need you to go and figure out, like, when Cardi B said what Cardi B said, why she said it, and then let's have that conversation. So now you understand a little bit more of a human perspective. Now let's have the conversation. What will we create together? But if all I am is mediocre and have been hiding behind the conversations and the words and the buzzwords, you're going to put the same thing everybody else is putting in AI. And guess what the hell is going to spill out the cup? Everything else everybody was saying.
1000%. And really quickly, if you could get, this is like a lightning round I'm throwing in between. If you could get rid of one buzzword that you've been hearing since you've been here, what would it be? Let's like quickly go down the line. I'm putting you on the spot. I don't know.
Put me on the spot?
Putting you all on the spot. What's one buzzword you get rid of right now?
Human. Like that has now become a buzzword. Where I was like, we've always been human. Why is it a buzzword?
Nice.
I would get rid of AI.
Yeah. Okay. Tim, that's
Well, I'd love to say agents, but that is my business, so I can't say agents, but probably agents.
all right.
Let's see here. Maybe the attention economy. That I think is getting a little stale too.
Well, and I think AI is trained now to pick up on all those words, and we're going to get fed that back a million times today. But getting back to the human buzzword, I do think being out in culture is the only way to shape and move culture. And like we said, you can't regurgitate over and over again, even the Levi's example. Like, how do you create new work and put new work out there? And you don't get that by sitting in front of a computer regurgitating to yourself all the time. You have to live a little. And I think inspiration comes from everywhere. It comes from showing up at Questlove's Uno game night the other night, and shout out to Uno as well on there, which is also a digital game for Mattel, which I'm bringing it back to Gabrielle.
Oh, now.
Gaming.
Go ahead. Do the plug, girl. I love it.
But in reality, those experiences are what are unique, especially in this environment. I know, Brandon, you met Oprah the other day. I don't know, I'm hearing some crazy stories. I'm sure you all have them. But that is what's going to drive good work. I do think there are moments in between socializing and your everyday life where that is where sometimes you're going to learn the most about your audience. And Gabrielle, you had a really interesting insight around what you're learning around when your audience engages with games.
Yeah, I think the marketing community in general is very obsessed with the zeitgeist, and like every brand wants to make these big cultural moments, and so they're looking for those opportunities to take advantage of those things and amplify their message. But I think what is really interesting is a lot of what people do, and especially in games, it's about me time. And to me, it's really interesting of like, how do I make impact during me time? And in gaming, prime time for gaming is prime time for TV, but a lot of the times it's like casual gaming indexes female, it indexes millennial, Gen X women. And so these are like busy people. They're career people, they have families, they're taking care of parents. And so at the end of the day, like I always say, for me, it's like that Chardonnay and potato chip moment, where I'm gaming, and those are really impactful moments to reach people too. And I think that brands over-index at culture and under-index at finding the quiet time to reach people. And I think that that's something that we speak to brands a lot about, and something that we've really figured out like a winning formula. And so while it's not like, oh my God, this thing is going viral, it's kind of like inverse virality, but it is really impactful, and it's at scale, but in a quiet moment.
I love maybe my word I'll get rid of is culture, and I've used all your buzzwords today. So I love that you're talking about the quiet moments, the me time moments. There's just as much to learn about our consumers in that. And I think part of that is what people do in their personal time, and that is, especially as creatives, how we engage in craft and like the real human I'm going to use them all. The real human element of craft. But I would say, Matt, you actually had a good take on how craft is becoming more important than ever in this space.
So I'm a big believer. What I love about what AI unlocks is allows us all to become kind of creatives and marketers again. It allows us to focus on our craft. And I think about craft very simply as it's the ability to elicit a human emotion, right? So when we build a creative, we build an experience. We have our Chardonnay and potato chip moment, which I'm gonna have to try that this evening. It sounds so
Add
good.
some caviar and we'll call it a
Yeah.
day.
Oh, there we go. That's a little bit of heaven there. But I think craft is really where we as marketers and as an industry flourish. It's that edge of creativity. And I think of what builds craft as kind of a couple things. And I think you said it quite well, which is the first part of craft is actually showing up and like being in the arena, right? And actually trying things out.
Yeah.
So many times we miss on developing our craft because we're not actually painting 1,000 paintings, right? Picasso wasn't brilliant.
Quantity
first
over
time.
quality.
Quantity over quality,
Yep.
stay at it, iterate and move and be in the arena. I think that's such an important part about craft. I think the other part that makes craft is actually having the willingness to fail.
Totally.
And that's okay. And actually, I always say experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And so to build experience, we have to make a lot of little mistakes, like fail fast, fail small, fail so you can recover. But each one of those is how we build our craft. It's how we develop that experience around craft. And I think that's what makes us all magical from a human standpoint. I think that's what AI as a tool can support the iteration, but we have the imagination and the willingness to leave in. And then the third thing I would say on craft is that genius is often found on the editing room floor. What you purposely choose to leave out is so important. I don't know how many times you've seen briefs that it's 75 pages long, everything has to be in the brand document, and you're like, I have a 30-second ad slot. I do not know. We are not making movies here, folks. Like it's, I used to do a lot of work in the automotive industry, and we would come in with these creative briefs that we would get, and you're looking at this thing, I'm like, I'm feeling like I have to build the next Transformers movie with Michael Bay to show the new truck jumping over a canyon and fireworks go off, and then somehow we find ourselves on a beach, and then we're pulling a giant submarine, which I'm like, I don't even know how this makes sense, and I'm like, it's only a 30-second ad break, and we got to put a teaser on the end for, the local car dealer in West Memphis, Arkansas. So, like, we really got 20 seconds to tell the story. And so the best craft that I learned from that experience was the conscious choices of what you leave on the editing room floor. So I think craft for us as an industry, as we kind of embrace the evolution of technology that supports our speed and development, craft is the soul of kind of marketing and advertising and media.
1,000%. And I'm a visual artist on my spare time and come from a design and creative background. So craft is really, really important to me. But also editing is something I feel like we all have some, that's a hard part. Like you said, it's very intentional. Even when you look at creative books and portfolios, I tell people and new students, you have like 8 seconds to really get attention. And I think knowing what your strongest pieces are, knowing how to edit your own work, even before it goes up the chain, I think that's the strongest thing we can teach. But also, like you said, what gets left behind and learning to fail, like actually trying to fail, and quantity over quality. I think you can't learn if you don't make mistakes. And what I'm seeing right now is that people expect to be good at things off the bat. And like you said, you can pick up a paintbrush, you won't be Picasso, but like go, try and fail. And eventually you'll have your own style, your own craft that comes through, and you won't be Picasso, you'll be you. And I think that's even better, but we expect to pick up a paintbrush and be good for the first lesson. And I'm thinking of this because I do give art lessons as well as, working in marketing and creative. And I see people expect to just be, it looks easy, I'm going to be good right away. And especially with new technology, people just, whether you're doing creative or doing tech or data, people just expect to pick it up right away. And I think the same thing as creativity, the way you're prompting, the way you're directing, the way it takes time. And I do think that craft and taste is something that comes from knowing what you like and what you don't like. And if we're just looking at stuff we like, or we're not even showing stuff we don't like, there's no conversation to talk about what we don't like, which is where a lot of the lessons come in. And so getting back to kind of the risk taking and the boldness of all of this, I would say if it's not making you a little bit uncomfortable, and I've told my teams this cross-functionally as I present to them new work, but like, if you're not feeling uncomfortable, then we're doing something wrong. Like, it shouldn't feel safe. How many ideas come to Cannes and then that felt safe all the way up until they get submitted? Like, you don't know until you put it out there. And it's not always dependent on how it's received. We have one bit of audience here, but there's also so many consumers that are going to receive it differently. So I just think putting yourself out there, taking risks. So coming back to like, what ideas have we left on the cutting room floor? I have there been any experiences here? This is kind of a group question, but like, was there something that you went to put out there that either terrified you that you put out, or you had to keep safe on? I don't know. Start, Brandon. Was there something?
Well, I mean, it was actually in Paris, and it was when I was working on Louis Vuitton, and I remember sitting in the room and being like, hip hop is about to become the new luxury. And this was in 2008. And they looked at me and they said, American, what do you know about French luxury? I said, you make it. We make it hot. And I was like, they're never going to get this now. But I got to introduce them. As long as I can introduce them to the next people, the next wave of these creators that they are not even looking at. Just maybe one day, it'll happen. So I introduced them to a lot of cool people. And one of the people I introduced them to was a young guy by the name of Virgil Abloh, who it took him 10 years. 10 years. And he became the first Black American creative director for the House of Louis Vuitton. And then did y'all just see what freaking Pharrell just did this week?
The beach, the waves.
The waves.
Incredible.
Like, that is something that sometimes we have to also know with the craft and the conversation, that they're not gonna see it right away. And that's okay. But if you're not brave enough to at least be like, sit in the truths that you know and authentically show, which is another buzzword I hate this week, but authentically show up as your whole self and bring that different perspective to the world, it may take 10 years. And it may be a small voice in the room that no one is really listening to. But as long as you can at least start the conversation that came from your heart, that you were standing 10 toes down on, you will actually be the bravest voice in the room when everyone else is telling you you're crazy. That's just because you live in the future. You have been taking risks your entire career. So being afraid is inevitable. Taking the risk is inevitable. Not being listened to in the room is inevitable. But being brave enough to say it in the room and not care because it's your truth, someone was listening. Someone was listening. And then when you finally get to see Pharrell do a fucking wave for a fashion show for Louis Vuitton and just ate it, I had nothing to do with it, but I had a small part I played in it. And that is why we take the risk every day.
I love that. And better to have a point of view than to be mediocre and vanilla. And I think whether you're an associate level, most junior or most senior, what people are hiring you for generally is your point of view and your expertise. And I'm sure you want all of your teams to have a strong point of view and not just say, well, what do you think? And so I'm curious if any of you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the risks we took several years ago was in the gaming space. There is this everlasting stereotype that gamer is like the boy in the basement. And a lot of holding companies, agencies, they have gaming divisions, and they really index to targeting Gen Alpha in gaming. And, the truth is, like, there's more gamers over 25 than under 25. And the average age of a gamer, console, PC, mobile, is 35 years old. And I think that we kept on getting briefs for targeting younger people. And I'm like, obviously these people don't really understand who we are, understand what's going on, because we are millennial and Gen X women. The great thing about our audience is it is a female economy. They make 80% of purchase decisions. They're constantly buying things for themselves, their friends, etc. So I think our bold move was just really coming out, and it's like, video games for adults. Like, we are millennial Gen X. We just made a really big point in our marketing materials to brands and to the community. This is who we are. Whereas in years prior, we were sort of trying to like play both ends. Because yes, we have some younger screen games, and yes, we can do both. But I think that was our risk of like, I'm really passionate about fighting ageism. Like, I hate this 18 to 49, and then at 50, you're not a consumer anymore. You're not an attractive consumer anymore. This makes no sense when they're the ones with all the money. You've seen it in luxury goods too, where they've taken so much of like this focus. Like, I remember Gucci did something in Roblox. Like, what kid is buying Gucci? They're trying to reach the consumer of tomorrow, but here's the thing, like, there's no brand loyalty. I think there was this concept, old school, that, oh, if you get them when they're young, they're gonna buy you until they die, and that's not true. So I'm just really bold about, I'm trying to make old cool again, whatever that is, and, you know, showcase my generation and older generations and younger generations, like, it's all good. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to, the advertising community doesn't have to be so youth obsessed. And so that was a little bit of a risk, but it was also just transparency, you know?
I love that. I love that. And talking about youth obsession and I work for a mostly youthful starting brand, which we hope to carry to every generation. But like you touched upon something is like, we're so hyper targeted right now, which is why, Tim, I was going to ask you in data and tech. I'm sure a lot of people you work with want they want to target a specific demographic. They want all of the answers to be laid out before them. How do you push to say that there's, like, data can only give you so much?
Well, there's definitely a trend towards taking brand advertising and have it act more like performance advertising.
Yeah.
And leveraging that data. And AI gives us the ability to dive deep into attributes of consumers that we may not have realized were correlated or causal to an outcome that we care about. And we hear a lot, that might be another buzzword, is outcome-based marketing. But you know, we hear a lot about that. But I think, to the point that everyone's making on the panel, that loses something when you start to say, I'm going to create 1,000 pieces of creative because I can, and AI will spit it out for me, and I'm going to match it up against 1,000 or 2,000 segments, and I'm going to test and control. And I think that's a brilliant model for very directed marketing, where you're trying to drive a very specific outcome. And there's lots and lots of examples of that. But I think it's missing something in the storytelling, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge we see.
That's almost the opposite of what we're saying about craft, which is quantity over quality. In tech and marketing, sometimes quality over quantity.
I mean, the possibilities are endless with the technology today. In fact, we're seeing a massive push into SMB customers for connected television, and lighting up television ads that they could no longer, or in the past, couldn't afford to build, nor have the technology or capability of even launching the ad in the first place. And now all that tech exists. And so it's going to be interesting to see from, you know, that's an example of somebody who may not be as creative or afford an agency, and is able to participate with on a Disney streaming platform, for example, versus the larger brands.
Yeah. Well, we have 4 minutes left. I feel like we could do a couple lightning round. To the group, what is the brand? What brand would you say is really taking risk and that you're kind of looking as inspiration to right now, if you have one?
I would say one I've been thinking about lately, because it's kind of created a category, is I like athletic brewing. I think it's a
which one?
Athletic brewing. Really cool business, kind of building into like the non-alcoholic beer space. It was kind of sleepy forever. I think Old Duels had been around for, it felt like a century, and it was like, meh. But like Athletic came in, and I think they did a really good job creating a whole category. And I think it's fun to see how they blend a little bit of the Red Bull model around experiential marketing, but they're also out there taking a lot of risk, bringing in a very complex portfolio, or a strong, robust portfolio of products. They're leading into their direct-to-consumer side of their business, and they're kind of becoming an omni-channel kind of player as well. So I think it's a really interesting story of an idea to how do you build a category and reinvent it and tell a new story.
Anyone else inspired this week?
I'm inspired by Bobby, right? And what Bobby did with Cardi B for baby formula, right? I think about how risky that was. Could you imagine going in that room and being like, yo, Cardi B, yo. And Cardi B actually reached out to them. Like, that's wild about it, because she was a human that was having a baby and was going through all the things that mothers go through. So we know her as Cardi B, and that's awesome. But she's somebody's sister, she's somebody's cousin. So she's going through all the things that women are going through. And Bobby came in and was like, super dope. Like, let's talk about the vulnerability of motherhood and all the things that you have to deal with. And she was just a beacon of it. But then the fact that they did that, and then they did a beautiful digital platform that just had people write in their story. Like, they had a 1-800 number that mothers could call in and just talk about their story. And then they compiled all of that data and all of that information and then took it to Congress and was like, yo, we need to figure out how women get more like time off to be mothers. Like, what are we doing to change legislation in that world? Now, when a brand can do that, that means it stands 10 toes down on what I said earlier, on the commitment that they have to the community. Not about the messaging, because most brands want to follow the trend and like, well, everyone's talking about this, we're going to talk about that. They're like, we are about moms and babies and the babies that they're having and making sure that they are healthy, both the mother and the baby. So everything we're going to do is just talk to that, whether you like it or not. But you can't hate authenticity. And then if we can take the power of a brand and use our commitment to the consumer, but not just to the consumer, but the world, and put it into the world and all the power that we have as a brand, now we can change the world from the inside out and then be the beacon and the lighthouse, not the plug, that draws everyone to it. And then now brands will behave that way because they see it truly changes the world.
I love that. That's kind of why we're all here, right? Like, to do amazing work and to put things out there that ultimately influence in a positive way to change the world. And so I would just say this has been such a good conversation. You guys are all so interesting from different facets of the industry. And I hope everyone feels inspired to take some risk and do some different things and show up in different ways. And let's be the ones to drive culture and drive bold decision making. And I think we can all play it safe and drive sales, I'm sure. But the really good ideas that are going to end up here in future years are the ones that are really shaping how we show up. So thank you to the panelists. This has been awesome. Thank you to these guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.